In the previous lesson, I gave you your first introduction to resourceful controllers, and now we're going to take it just a step further, and I will show you a very basic workflow for creating a resource and rendering the necessary views. So we are going to continue on with that idea of a photo, and if you think for a resource, well, we need a way to view all photos, one photo, edit a photo, create a photo, update a photo, and delete a photo. But luckily, when we create a resource, Laravel will generate all of the necessary methods to make this as easy as possible. And in fact, we're going to take it one step further. Remember a few lessons back when I showed you my custom generators tool? So if I run artisan, which is just an alias for PHP artisan, by the way, you'll see that we have some generators set up. If you don't have this, go back to the custom generators lesson. Don't worry, it only takes a moment to set up. But now we have an easy way to scaffold everything that we'll need here. So let's run artisan generate a resource, once again for a photo. We're going to start from scratch. And the fields that I need for the photo will be the caption, which will be a string, as well as the path to the image. So we'll say path, and that too should be a string. All right, so that's going to do a bunch of things right off the bat. Let's take a look. It'll begin by creating a resourceful controller for us. It's going to create our database migration. It's going to create a seed file for us so that we can seed it. It's going to create a photo model. It will create some tests for us to make sure that those routes are working as we would expect. And it will also create this photos directory with just a handful of views that you are likely to use. Finally, a couple other things it will do. From your database seeder, it's going to call your photos table seeder. Again, if that's new to you, go back and watch the database seeding lesson. And then finally, if I switch over to routes, because we're creating a resource, it knows to update your routes file to run route resource for photos and specify that the photos controller should be responsible for that. So now we need to add a few photos. So I'm going to go into my photos table seeder, and we'll say the caption will be some photo, and the path will be, and why don't we call it img/1.jpg, and then we'll do one more for another photo, and this will be 2. This is one way that you can do it. And the basic idea is if you actually store the images within the database, that can get really large really quickly. Instead, we are only going to store a path to where those images are located. And if I scroll down, we can add that to the public directory. So we'll create a new folder called img, and I will pause just for a moment to add a couple images. And there we go. Now you can see I've added 2 images. So if we wanted to view those, we would just boot up our server, go to localhost 8000/img/1, and now we can view those. Great, so now that we've created our seed file, let's go ahead and migrate the database, artisan migrate, and now artisan db seed to seed the table. Now if I switch back over to SQL Pro and I refresh, you can see we created the migrations table as well as the photos. But now look what I did. Notice that we included timestamps, but I forgot to specify that. So this is the great thing about migrations. If you do make a mistake like that, you can just roll it back. So I could say artisan migrate roll back, which we went over. And now if I reload it, you'll see we've removed the photos table. So now we can just go ahead and fix our error. Created at will be new date, and updated at will be new date time. And then I will just copy all of this and paste it in like so. This would be one way that you're doing it. If you are not going to be using Eloquent to create the table, just manually specify new date time. And that's fine in this situation. So let's try it again. Artisan migrate and artisan db seed. And now if I switch over and refresh, you'll see, yep, we have the caption, the path, the created at, and updated at. So now we have a couple photos. Let's figure out how we can present them. Well, let's go to our photos controller. And the index method should be responsible for displaying a collection of photos. Or as the comment here shows, display a listing of the photos or the resource. So let's just begin by returning photo all and see what we get there. I will run artisan serve. And now if I browse to /photos, you'll see, yes, we are returning some JSON for the 2 photos that are stored in the table. Great. But in this case, we're not really building an API, so I don't want to return JSON. I want to load a view. So let's say photos equals photo all. This is one way to do it. It's not the most testable way, but let's stick with this for now so we don't cover too much. And then I will return view, make, photos.index, and then compact photos. Now, compact, this is actually a PHP function that a lot of people don't know. What compact will do is it's going to create an array with the key of the first item being photos and the value of that item being equal to the variable with the name photos. So in this case, that will essentially return photos, and then the result of photo all is what you're going to get. It's just a shorter way of writing view make photos.index with photos equals photos. Now, photos index, if you're not familiar, that means we're going to load the view, and we're going to go into the photos folder and load the index view. So it's sort of like just doing this, but photos.index makes it feel a little more object-oriented. It's kind of a cleaner way to do it. All right, let's see what we get now. Well, if I reload, we're just going to load that index view. So at this point, let's create a section for the container. And then using Blade, we'll say for each photos as photo, let's just begin by saying photo caption. Now in this case, we've created a section, so if I reload it, you're not going to get anything at all, and that's because it's been placed within a section. If I were to remove that entirely and reload it, now you can see we get those two sections. And the reason why I'm doing this is because we want to make sure that we have a master page. So we will save this as master, blade.php, and I will add just a bit of HTML here. So now I can just yield the container. Now, to reference this master page, we have two different ways. First, as we've covered in a previous lesson, I believe, we can specify that we want to extend the master page. That will work if I reload the page. Or if you want to do this from your controller, here's what you could do. You could go back to your Photos controller, and at the top, we will add protected layout, and that will be master. And then rather than doing this number, we'll simply say this layout content equals view make photos.index and compact photos. Okay, let's delete that. And now if I come back and I reload the page, we're going to get the same thing. Good. So now we have an easy way within our controller to specify what the master page is, as well as nest some content within that master page. All right, so let's come back. We certainly don't want to simply display the caption. So we'll say for each one, why don't we put this within a UL with a class of photos, like so. Then for each one, we could say a list item, and we'll begin with photo caption. Let's see how that looks. There we go. Now we have a list. And above it, we should probably do this. Let's do a figure element. And let's just cut that out and place it within the fig caption, like so. Now within the figure, we can add our image as well as the alt text. So one more time, we'll just do photo caption. And as the source, we know we can do photo path. All right, let's see what we get now. If I reload, notice that we're not getting the path to the image. Let's see what the problem is. If I view the source, yes, it is trying to link to img/1, but notice that it's trying to make that relative to the photos collection. Now, there are other ways to fix this using some of Laravel's helpers, but an easy way to specify that we want to begin from the root is just precede it with a /. Now, if I reload, that will mean starting from the root. If I click on it, now we have some amazing pictures of Justin Bieber. So if I reload, now we have those. Great. So now we have a way to display all photos. The only thing I might do is just some quick styling to say that all images should have a maximum width of 600 pixels. And of course, you would place that within an external style sheet. All right, so now we have this listing of images. The next step would be, well, what about if we want to view one specific image? Well, each of these items should have an ID associated with it. So if you want, why don't we place it right here? Photo ID. If I reload it, you'll see, yeah, every single item has an ID associated with it. So we can use that ID to specify which image we wish to display from the table. So let's see how we might go about doing that. Let's make this a link. like so. Now, Laravel will be having HTML and form helpers that should be added to the framework fairly soon from the time of this recording. Chances are, if you're watching this video, they've already been added, but at least, again, at the time of this recording, I don't have access to those. So we're going to manually do it for now. So let's begin by hard coding this in. We basically want to link to /photos/1, but if we want to make that dynamic, we could say photo ID. Now, if I come back and I reload the page, if you take a look at the very bottom left, you should be able to see there's photos2 and there's photos/1. So now we have a way to link to a different URI, and this would be responsible for displaying only one item from your resource or collection. However, before we do that, could we clean this up? Yes, as I noted earlier, very soon from the time of this recording, Laravel is going to add some more HTML helpers that will make this a lot easier to generate links. But until then, if we don't want to hard code /photos in, you could link to a named route. So that would take the shape of something like this. Route to photos.show, and we would want to send through the ID of the photo, and that would be photos and photo ID. Okay, let's try that, and then we will go over it, and sure enough, we're going to get the exact same thing. All right, so let's review a little bit about this. And once again, this is going to be a lot easier very soon. What will route do? Well, that is a built-in helper function that will generate a URL to a named route. Now, what is a named route? A named route is essentially a descriptive string that points to a route. So while you could link to a lengthy route, maybe to the login page, or you could instead just say, use a named route called login, and whenever I reference that named route, what I'm really wanting you to do is go to this longer URI. So in this case, we're linking to photos.show. If you wanted to link to, for example, the index, notice that these will just mimic the method names. So photos.index, photos.show, photos.edit. Let's see what that one would be. Well, if I reload, you'll see that will take you to photos/the ID and /edit, at which point the edit method will trigger in your controller. So let's continue on. We're now displaying all of our photos. Next, we want to display one photo. So we would come back to our photos controller, come down to the show method, and this would be responsible for showing one photo. So we could say photo equals photo find by ID. Then return view make photos.show, and once again, compact photo. Let's try it. Reload, and now we are loading the show view. So then at this point, all we need to do is populate that. Once again, section for the container. And this time, maybe we will have an H1 with photo caption. However, if I reload, notice that that's not working. Well, remember, we're using a master page right up here. So we would need to do the exact same thing as we did within our index view, unless you wanted to extend it directly from the show view. So here we'll just say photo show, compact photo. All right, one more time, and now we're getting the caption. And finally, let's just display that image. Once again, photo, caption. You could even place this within a partial if you're going to be using it a lot. Photo, path. All right, let's try it out. There we go. So now we have photos/1, photos/2, or we go to the root collection. So notice how when you're working RESTfully, these URIs are just very natural. You don't even need to learn them. You just know, all right, if I want to view all, I go to this URI. If I want to view one specifically, I go to that URI. If I want to edit a view, we could go to /2/edit. If I want to create a view, we can go to the collection name /create. Let's do that now. Views/create. And right here, if I come up, you'll see here's our create view. So let's say this layout content equals view make photos.create. Now within our create view, let's just say for the container. And here we will simply add a placeholder that says show form to create new photo. There we go. So once again, photos, let's view one photo, let's create a photo, and let's edit the photo with an ID of 1. That will be the last thing that we do. section container, and then we will flesh these out a little bit more in the coming lessons once we have access to some of the new helpers that will be added. I don't want to go through this whole process if, in a handful of days from the time of this recording, there will be an easier way to do it. So I will hold off until then. And all I will write here is edit photo with ID of photo ID. And then in order for that to work, we need to go to the edit method, and we'll say photo equals photo find by ID. And then I will yank that and make sure I run photo edit and then compact the photo. All right, let's try it again. There we go. So think how powerful that is. You want to view all the photos, or you want to view one photo, or maybe you want to edit that photo, or maybe you want to create a new photo. Now, what about those other methods though? We've seen index, create, show, and edit, but we also have store, update, and destroy. Well, these are not going to be GET requests. So for example, when you create a new photo, the form on this page should post to /photos, at which point this method will run. So when you run post photos, this method is run, and that will be responsible for essentially adding a new item to the database. The next one is update. That would be if you run photos/1/edit. Well, now we're not adding a new item, we are updating an existing one. So the form that you display here should then put to photos ID. Notice we're using a put request there, which most commonly is interpreted as updating a resource. And then finally, let's say you want to delete it entirely. Maybe you have a link right here, one for edit, one for delete. Well, when you delete it, you would have two options. One, and this is something that I believe will be added to Laravel soon, there will be a get photos ID delete. And that would essentially be a non-destructive URI where the user confirms that they do want to delete that. If they do, then the destroy method would be called when a delete request is sent to /photos/ID. So it's a lot to cover. We're going to dig into some of this more once we have access to those new form helpers. So until then, have a play with this and stay tuned.